You're walking down the street, you glance at your phone, and out of nowhere, a car hits you. You open your eyes, you're lying on the asphalt. Your arm is bent at an angle it was never supposed to bend. Your chest hurts with every breath, but you're calm, because you know an ambulance is 8 minutes away. In 20 minutes, you'll be under an X-ray machine. In an hour, your arm will be in a cast. Antibiotics, painkillers, sterile bandages, all of it is waiting for you. Now imagine the exact same accident, but 50,000 years ago. You slipped, you fell, your arm broke. There's no ambulance, no X-ray, no antibiotics, no sterile anything. The nearest hospital doesn't exist because the concept of a hospital doesn't exist. So what do? And more importantly, why did so many ancient humans who suffered injuries like this survive anyway? Because your DNA comes from the ones who did. Let's start with the first problem, the one that killed people faster than anything else: bleeding. In the modern world, if you're bleeding, you reach for a bandage or a surgeon stitches you closed. For an ancient human, the first 10 minutes after a serious injury were the most dangerous minutes of their life. Blood loss was one of the most common causes of death in prehistory, but they weren't helpless. In 1957, archaeologists working in Shanidar cave in Iraq uncovered the skeleton of a Neanderthal, now known as Shanidar 1. His right arm was completely gone, amputated at some point during his life. And he lived for years after that injury. Someone stopped that bleeding. We don't know exactly how, but researchers believe it likely involved pressure and packing. Plant material pressed directly into the wound and held there, the same basic principle doctors use today. Some plants found at ancient sites are known to have natural clotting properties, and it's likely early humans had already figured that out through trial and error, passed down as knowledge across generations. Once the bleeding stopped, the next problem was infection. And this is where it gets interesting, because ancient humans didn't have a pharmacy, they had a forest. At Shanidar Cave, researchers found pollen from at least 8 different flowering plants in the soil around one burial. Some of those same plants are still recognized today for their medicinal properties. There's debate about whether this was a burial ritual or something more practical, treatment. Either way, it tells us these plants weren't there by accident. In many parts of the world, wounds were packed with charred plant material, essentially early charcoal, which we now know can help absorb toxins and reduce infection. Cooked animal hide was wrapped around injuries too, functioning as one of the earliest versions of a bandage. Now let's talk about broken bones, because this is where it gets even more surprising. In the modern world, you get an X-ray, a cast, maybe surgery. Ancient humans had none of that. So how did they know if a bone was healing correctly? They watched and they remembered, and that knowledge passed from person to person. Paleoanthropologists have found plenty of ancient skeletons with bones that healed crooked arms and legs that fused back together at odd angles. That tells us something important. The person survived without proper treatment. But researchers have also found skeletons where broken bones healed remarkably straight, which tells us something even more important. Someone held that limb in place, kept it still, and didn't let it move until it healed. That's essentially the earliest version of a cast. A wooden splint tied down with strips of hide, immobilizing the limb long enough for the bone to set correctly. And then there's the part of this story that catches almost everyone off guard. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of skulls around the world with a very specific, very deliberate hole drilled or scraped into them. This practice, called trepanation, dates back at least 7,000 years. Ancient humans were performing skull surgery. Here's the detail that changes everything. In a significant number of these skulls, the bone around the hole shows clear signs of healing. That means the person survived the operation. Some skulls even show multiple trepanation sites, meaning the same person survived the procedure more than once. We're still not entirely sure why they did it. Some researchers believe it was used to relieve pressure after a severe head injury. But regardless of the reason, the evidence tells us something remarkable. Ancient humans understood basic anatomy, knew how to keep a wound clean enough to prevent fatal infection, and knew how to care for a patient through recovery. But the single most important factor in surviving an injury wasn't a plant or a splint or a surgical technique. Remember Shanidar 1, the Neanderthal with the amputated arm? He also had cataracts, hearing loss, and a badly damaged leg. He couldn't hunt on his own. He couldn't have survived alone. His group fed him, protected him, and kept him alive for years after he stopped being able to contribute physically. That's the real secret to surviving injury in the ancient world. A person alone with a broken leg dies. A person who belongs to a group lives. In the modern world, we've somewhat forgotten this. Hospitals, doctors, insurance paperwork, it can all feel isolating, like something happening to you alone. But for our ancestors, healing was never a solitary act. You were never truly alone, which meant you were never truly left to die alone either. So think back to that accident. You got hit by a car. 8 minutes later, help arrives. An hour later, your arm is in a cast. It feels routine, almost boring. But what you just experienced is the end result of 300,000 years of trial, error, observation, and people who refused to let each other die. Ancient humans had no x-rays, but they learned to watch a wound heal. No antibiotics, but they found medicine growing in the forest around them. No surgeons in the modern sense, but they cut into skulls, and their patients lived to tell about it. Next time you get a small cut and reach for a bandage without thinking twice, remember, that simple motion is standing on top of one of the oldest, hardest-won victories our species ever achieved.